What's happening, everybody? This is John Mulry, and you are very, very welcome to the first ever podcast episode of CuriosityFM. And I'm here with none other than Paul Mascetta. Paul's a good friend of mine. Paul's an absolute beast of an expert on persuasion, copy, NLP, and all things direct response marketing. And I'm just delighted to have him on as the very first ever guest of CuriosityFM. Just before we bring in Paul and actually go through everything I want to talk with Paul, I just want to give a brief introduction of what this podcast is all about. So for the longest time, I've held this belief, and it was more of an internal thing that I haven't really shared with a lot of people, is that I firmly believe that there's two types of people in the world. There's those that are curious, and there's those that are not. There's those that are curious about things that will improve their lives, improve their health, improve their business, improve their finances, and everything in between. And then there's the other side of people where they just coast through life and they accept things as they are, and they never really try and strive and improve. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what people want to do. But like, this podcast is specifically for the people who want to strive and get ahead, for the people who are curious about improving themselves, about learning, about their health, their finances, their business, and everything in between. Because there's lots of different things that I'm curious about. We're going to cover lots of different topics. And I'm super excited for the people I'm going to be bringing onto this podcast, none other than Paul himself. So Paul, thank you so much for being the first ever guest, right?
Absolutely, man. I'm pumped to be here. I know we had a little bit of connection issues, so hopefully everyone can see me. I can see myself, but I think, John, you and I have conversations that are cool and interesting enough that even if they don't see us for a few minutes or they don't see me for a few minutes, we'll get along just fine.
Yeah, I was actually joking with my wife, Jess, yesterday, saying with my Irish accent and your New York accent is going to be pretty wild. That like people listen to two crazy guys with two crazy accents, right?
Yeah. You know, it's funny, man. When you talk about people that are curious and people that aren't curious, like I completely agree with that. And I am definitely one of those curious people, sometimes to my own detriment. I think I told you in a previous conversation, I am notorious for starting things and not stopping them. And that is mainly because of my curiosity. Like, something will get my attention, I will go down a rabbit hole on it, and I can become like immersed in it for like a very short window of time. And then I just completely lose interest in it. And not with everything, but with a lot of things. But that curiosity is there, man. That's the flame that kind of starts, that ignites that fire all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with entrepreneurs starting their businesses or coming up with offers for their customers or whatever the case is. It all starts with that curiosity, being curious enough to actually do the research into your clients and your customers, what their needs and desires are, and then be curious enough to actually take action and implement the stuff that you want to implement. But before we really kind of dive into things, I want to you're celebrating right now, or at least you should be, because was it just last week that you got your black belt in jiu-jitsu after 10 years?
True. Yeah. So just under 11 years. This was my New Year's resolution in 2013, I wanted to join a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school and learn it. And so that was 2013. And so first week of January will be 11 years. Yeah. 11 years it took me to get there.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, it's not something that I've ever done, but it's something that I've been thinking about maybe getting into it, because I see so many successful people talk about how things like jiu-jitsu, karate, taekwondo, all that kind of stuff has helped them with their discipline and business as well. Like, you hear, I don't know if you listen to Joe Rogan's podcast, but he talks a lot about his jiu-jitsu, and he talks a lot about the discipline and everything else that brings. Now, I consider myself a pretty disciplined person with how I structure my own days and my fitness and my health and everything else. But doing something like that is it's never something I did. But man, I'd getting to black belt is it's some achievement. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you, man. There's a really good book called The 32 Principles of Jiu-Jitsu. It's by a guy named Henner Gracie. So the Gracie family, just to take a quick step back, the Gracie family are basically the most famous family in when it comes to martial arts, because they took Japanese jiu-jitsu. They learned Japanese jiu-jitsu. So they're Brazilian. And they learned Japanese jiu-jitsu in the early 1900s from a Japanese guy. And then they adapted a lot of the moves because they were smaller guys. So they adapted a lot of the Japanese jiu-jitsu into what is now Brazilian jiu-jitsu so that the smaller, weaker guy could outmaneuver a tougher, bigger, stronger opponent using more technique and intelligence as opposed to brute strength. And so Helio and Carlos Gracie are the founders of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The both of them combined had like 25 kids or something like that. And one of them, Horian Gracie, is the marketer of all of the Gracies. He's like the showman, the salesman, the marketer. And so when these guys really started developing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the way that they would test themselves is in these things called Vale Tudo fights, which were no holds barred, no rules, fight to the death, no time limit, street fight type of scenarios. And they were beating everybody from all different types of martial arts. So Horian Gracie, being the marketer that he is, he was like, I want to showcase this. I want to bring Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the world, and I want to prove that it's the superior martial art. So he started the UFC in 1993. And so the UFC back then was a no holds barred, no time limit, no weight limit tournament where you could do anything except bite and poke in the eyes.
This is the same UFC that you're talking about today. Like, it started by this guy?
Yeah, started by this guy. And so it was a no holds barred. Like, you could do anything except eye gouge and pull hair, but anything else was fair game. And so no weight classes, and it was all different types of martial arts. So you had boxing, taekwondo, karate, Muay Thai, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. And what they did was they took the smallest of all the brothers, Royce Gracie, who was like 150 pounds, and they put him into the tournament because they didn't want to use Rickson Gracie was like the top Gracie guy. I mean, he was like a big, jacked up, like Adonis looking type of guy that would destroy anything in his path. But they didn't want to use him. They wanted to use the smaller guy just to prove how efficient and effective it was. And he won UFC 1. I think he had 4 matches and he strangled everybody. And so that's how most people got turned on to this, to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, was seeing this guy who was like 150 pounds strangling gigantic guys. I mean, he was fighting guys, 200, 220, 250, wrestlers, boxers, all types of different, backgrounds in martial arts, and he was beating them. And so anyway, that short little story was to tell you that Horian Gracie's son, Henner Gracie, is very much like the father. He's a very well-spoken, excellent jiu-jitsu guy. He was actually on Shark Tank because he created a backpack that turns into I forgot what it turns into, but it's a jiu-jitsu backpack that turns into something else. And he wrote a book called 32 Principles. And the 32 Principles are principles that he has observed in, he's been training jiu-jitsu since he's a baby. He was like born into it. These 32 principles of life that mirror experiences and lessons that you learn on the mats. So it's very good if you're trying to see like, well, people always say there's a lot of correlations, like Rogan talks about it all the time, between jiu-jitsu and what goes on the mats and what goes on in life. And it's so true. Everything that happens to me in life happens to me on the mats. It's almost like it's just magnified and amplified. So it's a great book for people that really want to see like the correlation and the relationship between everyday life and grappling.
Cool. And like, have you found that with things like jiu-jitsu that it raises your ability to be able to deal with uncertainty, to be able to deal with things out of the norm, and just like freak things that happen on a daily either in your life, whether it's someone cutting you off in traffic and you're freaking out, or whether it's in business where all of a sudden, some major struggle comes along and a lot of people will either like the fight or flight will kick in. And like, do you think like jiu-jitsu and other things like that has helped you be able to deal with those things? Are they some of the principles that the guy talks about, or is there other correlations?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a lot of that problem solving, making decisions under stress, staying calm in stressful situations. Absolutely. When we train one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu, which again is another thing that Rogan talks about, is that it's the only martial art where you can really spar at 100%. You can't spar at 100% in boxing. You can't do it with karate. You can't do it with Muay Thai because, you'll either knock somebody out, you'll give them a concussion, or you'll bust them open, right? But with jiu-jitsu, you're just training until someone taps. So it's almost like this duel to the death, and the tap is when I kill you. But the beautiful thing is that as soon as you tap, you just come back to life and we reset again. Right? Now, sometimes that tap could take, we do 6-minute rounds. So sometimes that tap could take me 6 minutes to get. I'm starting from one place and I'm thinking and methodically planning, and I'm setting traps and I'm using certain moves to get into other positions and situations. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. Sometimes they say in jiu-jitsu, sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail. Sometimes I'm the nail. Sometimes I got a guy beating me up. And that whole 6 minutes is me problem solving, how to escape positions, how to avoid submissions, how to stay calm when this guy's on my back, trying to choke the life out of me, how to just go back to like what position I need to be in to alleviate the stress on my neck so that I could start fighting out without losing oxygen. So yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, to be honest with you, I've never been like a road rage type of guy. I'm just the type of person where I don't take many things very personally. Okay. And when I do take things, especially from strangers, like if a guy cuts me off that I don't know, I could care less. I take things more personally with people that I care about because I value my friendships and my relationships. So I wouldn't say that it's helped me in that area. Where it has helped me is uncertainty. When I first got into business for myself, I quit a 6-figure a year job, a management job in Manhattan, and with benefits. And, I had 2 young kids, a wife, a mortgage, and all that kind of stuff. And when I first got into internet marketing for myself, the only income source I had was my email list. And so every time I'd send an email, I'd run to the computer and like, see, did I make any money from this? Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage this month? And it took me a while to learn that in business, you have seasons and you have ups and downs and there's volatility. And in the beginning, that was very stressful for me. Like I would lose sleep over that. I would stress out about that. I would get anxious and anxiety over that. And now with the combination of hardening myself with things like jiu-jitsu and then kind of just repeated exposure to it, it doesn't bother me anymore.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's take a step back from the jiu-jitsu in a second and talk a little bit more about you leaving that 6-figure position and to start off the your first business and everything else. So what was the what niche were you in the internet marketing, and like what did you get started with? And you talked about email lists, but what were some of the other things that you were doing as well to get those initial sales? Or do you remember your first ever sale?
Yeah, so I got into internet marketing, I like to say, by accident. So my best friend,
like all
Frank,
of us.
Yeah. So my best friend, Frank, was like a born entrepreneur, like one of these guys who just hated school, never wanted to work for anybody. The thought of like having to ask for vacation time was just something that he just absolutely dreaded. And so he started an online business in 2004. And basically what he did was him and his partner found a guy, a hypnotherapist, that was selling tons of hypnosis CDs on eBay. And they went to him and, they knew that he had hot products. And they said, what if we partnered up with you and built you a website where it doesn't affect anything that you're doing now, but we'll build you a separate website. We'll be responsible for driving the traffic and the sales. And, we split everything however they split it. And so after a few years of doing that, they got into info products. And so at that time, he came to me and he said, look, we're starting to make some money. We want to launch a ton of info products in ClickBank. So ClickBank is an affiliate network where you have vendors and affiliates. So vendors are people that own products. Affiliates are people that don't necessarily own products, but they have audiences or lists or databases that they want to promote products to. So it's a perfect little kind of marriage, which I'm sure you know,
Oh yeah.
but not sure if the listeners know. And so he was like, look, we want to create like 100 offers in ClickBank over the next 2 years. And we need a copywriter. And we can't afford a real copywriter. And you're a sales guy. You've been in sales your entire life, because those are the only jobs I was ever somewhat good at was sales jobs. And he said, would you want to be my copywriter? And at first I didn't even know what copywriting was. I thought that was like when you copy the rights to like music or books or stuff, something like that. And he was like, no, it's just salesmanship in print. However you talk to these people face to face, you're going to sell them you're going to sell the same way, but you're just going to do it in words, and we're going to sell it on a page. And so in the beginning, I was really just winging it. It was just all intuition. Like I would go through the entire product and I would just kind of put myself in the ideal person's shoes and say, like, what would it take to get them interested in this? What would it take to get them curious about it? Ultimately, what would it take to persuade them to buy it? And so now, granted, these were not offers that were going to cold traffic. They were mainly going to warm traffic. So it's not like I wrote 100 blockbusters, right, over a 2-year period.
I mean, wrote like 100 of any type of offers in that kind of a period is nuts. I mean, that's Agora levels right there. It's crazy, like, to do that many promos, that volume of promos.
Yeah. But what it did was it gave me a ton of experience. And these were offers in all different, like, all in self-help, but like, I mean, anything you could imagine, from like astrology to numerology to like communicating with animals. Like, it was like, you name it. And these guys, if it was in the spirituality or personal development space, if it was a topic in that space, these guys wanted to create a product on it. And so what started happening was as my friend was building affiliate and joint venture relationships, his joint venture partners, they were doing well with his offer. So they were like, who's your copywriter? So he introduced me to some of them, and I started getting copywriting gigs. Now, I'm doing this while I still have this 6-figure a year job in Manhattan. I'm working in Manhattan. I started out as a sales rep in a corporate gym in Midtown Manhattan. I worked my way up to a corporate sales rep, and then I became the general manager of the club. I had 50 people working under me. It was a $5 million a year operation. And it was all corporate clients, in Midtown Manhattan, that would work out on their lunch breaks. Few residential people, but mostly corporate people. And I was writing copy while I was, working, 40, 50 hours a week, traveling to Manhattan. And then I started making more money with this like copywriting side hustle than I did at my job. And what I realized was, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of in the wrong business, because I see these people that I write sales letters for, they pay me like $5,000, $6,000 to write a sales letter. And then they promote the offer that I just wrote to their list. They make back the money that they paid me, and then they're profitable forever. So I'm like, that's the business I need to be in. I need to like have an email list and be doing what they're doing. And so after 2 years of writing an insane amount of copy, I got a ton of experience. I immersed myself in it. Like I said, what would happen if I really like learned this? I started reading books, I bought courses, etc. And I got really good at it, but I got burnt out. And that's when I kind of shifted to wanting to get into my own info publishing business. So I asked myself, well, what's the only thing I'm really qualified to like teach people? Like, I was never one of those people that could like just start an info publishing business and like pretend I'm an expert at something that I know nothing about. It had to be something that I knew something about.
That's a good thing, because a lot of people could actually learn a lot from that. It's one thing to bring in a third party expert, like that's the face of the business, like that's one thing. But to like, we unfortunately, like, we have seen a lot of people that would start like they get bitten by the internet marketing bug, and they start producing content on stuff that they've no business producing content on. And it's like, it's the fact that you did that, it says a lot about your character as well. So
yeah. And so So I was like, well, the only thing that I'm really qualified, like I guess I'm kind of good at, is this copywriting, influence, persuasion, salesmanship, like all this stuff that I have experience in and all this stuff that I've been studying for the past 2 years. Let me just teach people about that. But when I initially quit my job, I just had an email list. So what I did was I went to a lot of my copywriting clients and I said, look, instead of I bartered with them. Instead of me charging you $5,000-$6,000 for a sales letter, I'll write the sales letter for free. You just send me traffic to my opt-in page. So I created an opt-in page with a lead magnet, and they sent me traffic, and I built my initial list of like, I don't know, between 2 and like maybe 5,000 people. And in the beginning, I would just market affiliate offers to them for like the first year. It took me a year to create my first info product because I was chasing perfectionism. I was procrastinating. I was doing all these different things. And then it's kind of like anything else. Once you have that breakthrough, then you kind of crank them out. And so after I finished the first product, then I was creating like a new info product every 3 months.
Okay. So you said chasing perfection, and that's something that we see like with the clients that we work with, even the multi 6-figure and 7 clients that we're driving traffic for. A lot of times, like they can be chasing perfection. Like we recently we had a paid consult with a client, and we were going through their funnel and looking at exactly what they're doing, and it was obvious that like they were just extremely slow with implementing things, extremely slow with testing creatives, extremely slow with testing new offers, testing angles, and like that whole idea of everything had to be on brand, everything had to follow their brand guidelines to a T, and everything was just like they were chasing perfection to a T, and it was no read like it was perfectly obvious to us looking at it. Like we test quickly, we test fast, and we move on super quick with our tests because we like one of our credos is money loves speed. And if you're taking forever to get things done, whether that's creating your first product in a year, or it's getting new test creatives out in your offer, or releading your sales page, or whatever it may be, if you're taking a crazy amounts of time to do that, it's like someone else is going to come along and get those customers, or you're just going to like not get the traction you need to get to keep moving forward and keep getting those sales. So like is in terms of chasing perfection, like I know you mentioned procrastination and everything else, but when you were doing that first product, like why do you think that to really kind of dive in, like why do you think that you were taking so long to do it? Was it like fear of success, fear of failure, or what do you think there's something else was going on?
Imposter syndrome. So like I felt like
Okay.
if it wasn't perfect, I would be found out. That people would realize I'm really not this great as like. So I chose influence, persuasion, salesmanship, and communication because I felt like that was the only thing I was qualified to teach. But in the back of my mind, I had this voice like, but I'm still not Robert Cialdini. I'm still not Kevin Hogan. I'm still not like, the top tier guys when it comes to persuasion. And so I had that voice in the back of my head that was like, if it's not perfect, I'm gonna be found out, and they're gonna say this guy's a fraud, he's not really who he says he is. And so like I would re-record it over and over again. I would go and change things, I would discover new things, and I would be like, oh, this is actually better than what I had. I was doing crazy stuff, John. I mean, first of all, I was doing everything in my business. I was writing sales letters, I was creating products, I was creating graphics, images, I was building out the funnels. There was no click funnels, it was optimized press. I was
Oh,
building out
optimized
funnels.
press.
Yeah, I was building out funnels with optimized press. I was using, the one-click upsells were like these like Frankenstein things that you had to like, put together. This would trigger this to trigger that to get an upsell. And so like I'll tell you how crazy I was when it came to chasing perfectionism. Like I would like make I would like make the logo to go like on the header of the website. And like, first of all, what I learned the hard way is that in many cases, the versions without the header performed better, without a logo in the header. And here
Yeah.
I am like trying to perfect like the gradient color of the logo. Like, is it better as a gold gradient or like a silver gradient? And like, bro, there were times where I would spend like hours just redoing the logo because I wanted the site to look so professional. And it was just really doing stuff like that. Like I didn't want to be quote unquote exposed and found out. I didn't want, people to think that I'm not who I really am, and that I'm not, as good of an expert as I claim to be. It was that really, that was the main thing.
Wow, I mean, like, I actually think there's a lot of parallels between your journey into all of this direct response marketing and my own journey into direct response marketing, because I pretty much did the exact same thing. I came from the fitness background. Originally, I came from the corporate background, and then I went away to South America volunteering for a year, came back, and I was okay. I don't want to work for anyone ever again. I was really into fitness at the time, as I still am, but it was just starting my fitness journey. So I was like, okay, well, this seems like a natural path for me. And then from there, like, I know we've talked about this story before, but like from there, I realized that advertising and marketing was really what drives everything forward. So I had to immerse myself in that so much, and like the parallels between what you're talking about and my own journey is they're pretty much the exact same, because I had the imposter syndrome, and to be honest, I even still get it today in certain aspects of what we're doing, because there's always people out there that are more successful than you. And so, and like, if you are striving to be more successful, I don't know, I think it's like, it's natural to have that imposter syndrome. And I think it's oftentimes like they're not willing to admit that they do have anxiety sometimes, and they do have imposter syndrome about what they're doing and everything else. And to me, I think it's like, well, why hide from that? So I got that as well, and I was the exact same person. Maybe not to the level of gold versus silver gradients and logos, but I was building everything myself. I was creating all my logos. I knew Fiverr was there and I tried it, but like, I might be waiting a week to get something back that I could do myself in 2 hours. I was building all of my funnels, writing all of the copy, shooting all of the videos, editing all the videos. I mean, like, I was doing it all as well. And I did it initially out of necessity, because I just didn't have any money to pay anybody else to do it. And then, like, when I started to get a bit of traction and I was paying people, it was like I found that, I don't know, maybe I wasn't managing them right, because it was just taking so long to get the results. So I was like, well, I could get this done quicker myself. And it it was great from a profit margin point of view, because I was the only person in the business. But then from a time and implementation point of view and ability to scale, it definitely slowed me down, like, massively. So it's just so similar that when you see people, that we meet people in our top one mastermind, and a lot of them have this backbone of coming from something like fitness or health, and they've transitioned into advertising and marketing or copy or sales, or whatever the case is. And there's so many parallels between, like, your journey and mine and so many others. It's just cool to see. So speaking of
What's I'll tell you a real quick story, a funny story. When I first got into my own business, in the info publishing business, I was out one night having a beer with my buddy John Flynn. How's that for an Irish name? And
actually, my mother's maiden name is Flynn, so maybe there's some distant
cool.
relation there.
Cool. So we're out having dinner and a couple of drinks one night, and he says to me, "So, like, what are you doing now exactly? Like, what exactly do you do now?" And I started explaining it to him, and he goes, "Yeah, but like, you're teaching people, like, communication skills. Like, anybody could learn that. Like, they could go learn that in a book. Like, why do they gotta buy your products to learn that type of stuff?" And, when he first asked me that question, or when he first, like, presented it to me that way, I still had that kind of imposter syndrome going on, and I really didn't know how to answer it. But what I've learned through experience is that, first of all, what you find is that there's really nothing new in life. What there are new ways of presenting things, new discoveries that accompany existing things, and ways to merge unrelated things to create new things. But unless you're Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, like, who's really, like, inventing something that the world has never seen before, there really is nothing new. Okay, that's number one. Number two, like, he was defining value in one specific way, which is how you can access the information. But that's just one way of delivering value, right? You can deliver value, like, I could deliver value by, like, if what he said was true, then we would never need teachers. right?
Yep.
Like people would just get books and read them. There would be no need for teachers, right? So sometimes the value is in how you communicate the information to the audience, that you help them get a breakthrough or you help them understand something. And by the way, anything I ever taught when it comes to influence, persuasion, and all that kind of stuff, I never ever said I invented it. What I would say is I might have created a methodology that merges something that I learned from NLP with something that worked for me in a real world sales situation. And I created my own little kind of framework from it. But I never said like, I'm the one who discovered, the law of scarcity, or I'm the one who discovered that, contrast is comparison and contrasting is how the human mind makes decisions. One of the ways, like I never claimed to invent anything. And so I think there's a valuable lesson there that like there's a lot of different ways to create value for people when it comes to information. I mean, it could be in the way you communicate the information. It could be in the way you sequence the information. It could be in the way you filter the information so that people don't have to go through the work that you went through to get like the nuggets out of it, right? So like, again, that just goes back to that imposter syndrome. Like, don't be so quick to like beat yourself up and think that you're not creating value if just because the information that you might be sharing with people already exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like years ago before I joined up with Todd and MFA and the agency and everything else. So I was obviously running my own info product business and consultant slash copywriting business. And for one of my info products for my one of my most successful webinars that I was running was promoting one of my offers called Email Academy Pro. And I was kind of modeling Russell's perfect webinar framework for that with like the 3 secrets or the 3 topics and then flow into your offer from there. But one of the secrets I was talking about that always did really, really well when I ran it live, evergreen, you can never really tell who's watching, but obviously when I was running it live, one of the secrets that I kind of underpinned in all my webinars was this phrase from a guy called Desiderius Erasmus from, I don't know, like the 1700s or something crazy like that. And it was like, it's when I first heard that, it really clicked for me in terms of, okay, now I know like the information that I've learned, the expertise that I've compiled from all these other sources and all these other experts, and whether I'm combining them together or I'm cherry picking bits that are relevant for me. But the quote that he's famous for, and like very few people have heard of him, but you've likely heard of the quote, is "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And it's like when
Yeah.
you're out there helping people, if you're out there trying to help someone like what we do with paid traffic, or what you might do with coaching on their marketing copy or their NLP or their persuasion in their copy and everything else, is like when they're coming to you for help, it's because they have a problem that they need solved. They have an unfulfilled desire. And there's a reason why they're out there seeking the solution to their problem, is because in like the purest essence, they're blind right now to the solution. But you have this, if you have the information that can help them, you're the guy, you're the one-eyed king, and you can help them get to the promised land. You can help them to go from point A to point B or whatever the case may be. And when I started to use that myself, it really massively helped me. But then also on the webinars, when I was using it, you'd see in the chat, it's like people were like having these breakthroughs when you like discuss this methodology, if you want to call it, to them, or just this way of thinking. You don't need to know everything. It's like in what's that movie, Catch Me If You Can, when Leonardo DiCaprio is like, he's teaching law or something like that, and they asked him, well, how did you teach law when you never went to law school? And he's like, well, I just read one chapter ahead of everybody else before the class started, so I knew more than them, or whatever the case is. No, I'm not saying do that, but like it paints the picture that like there's people out there that will always have these problems that they want solved, and if you can help them solve it, it doesn't matter if you're 10 steps ahead of them or 1 step ahead of them. If you can help solve their problem, isn't that all that matters?
That is all that matters, man. And again, I listen. I'm a big believer in that. With the caveat, and I think you would agree with me, is that if I can't solve a problem for somebody, I just tell them. Like, I don't know the answer to that. I can't. That's not something I can help you with. I can, maybe this is a better guy to talk to or a better gal to talk to about that issue. They're probably better equipped to help you with that than I am. That's it. As long as you're honest and upfront with people, as long you can absolutely build a business where you are 1 step ahead of the people you teach, as long as you're transparent with them about when you don't have the answer.
Yeah, I mean, one of our clients actually reached out to us a couple of weeks ago, sent me an audio message. He was like he was all excited, all pumped up. He's like, "Oh, I've got this super great idea. Can we hop on a call and talk through it?" And he was like, and get Damien on as well. I'd love his feedback." So three of us hopped on, and it was me, Damien, and the client hopped on with the client's team, and like they were sharing this is their idea, and we were like, "We can't help you with that. That's not in our wheelhouse." And it was basically they were looking for this kind of branding play and everything else, and we were like, that we really don't know anything about that. That's not our game, so we really can't help you. And they were like, "Oh, well, we thought you'd be able to help us." I was like, "Well, we can try and point you into the right direction of someone, but it's not our thing. We can't do it." And we
Yeah.
could have easily said, "Oh yeah, we'll help you," and maybe charge them extra on what we're charging them already. But like that's not how we do things. And I think when you start going down that path, it gets really messy really quickly. So
Yeah, for sure.
So let's take a shift a little thing, because I know this about you, and maybe people listening to this maybe not know it you, but you've gone through some traumatic experiences outside of business as well, in terms of accident in the car, which we might talk about, but then also you've had some other injuries as well, and you've had like some life-threatening times in your life as well. So talk a little bit about them and the some of the lessons that you've learned and perspectives that they've given you. Maybe start with the well, I'll let you pick one, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I guess we could start with I guess we could start with my car accident. Yeah, so in 2003, in January of 2003, I was coming home from a nightclub, and I didn't drink at this nightclub because they actually didn't serve alcohol. It was just like one of these places that you could go and listen to like really good house music, which is like my favorite type of music. And so it was just like one of these real underground, like very like these types of places are very focused on the experience. So like the sound system is tuned in such a way, and the acoustics of the room are every detail in the place is built out so that you have the most enriching experience when it comes to the way that the music sounds. It's not your typical kind of club atmosphere where they throw any kind of sound system in there and there's VIP tables, and you know all they're really trying to do is get you to spend money on alcohol. This is a place like where the top tier underground DJs, so people that have reached star status but in the underground world, that could have easily crossed over into the mainstream, but they didn't. They're just as popular. They sell millions of records, but they're very they're not known. They're not known as some of the bigger EDM DJs. And so I went to this club, and what happened was while I was in the club, I lost my car keys. So when I came
Okay.
out of the club, I was with my buddy who had his car, and I was like, I don't have my car keys. And I was like, can you take me back home to get my car keys, and I'll come back and get my car? And he was like, dude, it's late. Like it's probably, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning. He's like, just forget it. Like, just go home, go to sleep, and come back later and get them. But I was like, I didn't want to leave my car in Manhattan. So I made him take me home. I went back, and now by the time I got to the car, I was like tired. And so I was on my way home, and I fell asleep behind the wheel. And I fell asleep in this part of Brooklyn. It's the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, but it's a part where you come off the Brooklyn Bridge, and the highway the highway gets elevated. So you come up and you go on like this overpass, and then you're driving on an overpass for probably 5 miles, and then there's a street underneath. Well, I fell asleep as I was approaching the lift. So I fell asleep in the middle lane. I woke up because I smacked into the divider on the left side.
Jeez.
I bounced off of that, woke up, the car's like out of control. I can't control the steering wheel. And now I'm approaching the other divider that stops you from going over the highway and then like going over him and landing in the street, which is like 2 stories below. And so all I remember was like that wall coming at me and me saying, oh my God, I'm going to hit this wall and I'm going to go over it. The car's going to go over it. I'm dead. If somebody's underneath me, they're dead. Like this is all going through my mind. And so boom, I hit the wall, and it was like somebody like hit me in the chest with a baseball bat. I don't even think I had a seatbelt on at the time. I was 22 years old. And so what happened was when I hit that divider, I hit it kind of on an angle where the passenger side front really took the most impact. I know because my friends and my friend's dad had to go, the car was totaled, but they had to go get my belongings out of it, and they took pictures of it and showed me what it looked like. And basically the front right side of it looked like an accordion. It was just completely pushed in. So when the car hit, when I hit the brake with my knee pointing out, like as if I was sitting like almost like Indian style. Right? I had my right knee pointed out. I'm sorry. I had my right knee pointed inward, right? Because I was like crouched. And so when I hit, the impact made my hip pop out of the hip joint. Had I had it the other way, like an Indian style, I would have had the flexibility in my leg to withstand it, maybe. But because I was the other way, my hip popped out. I got a contusion on my lung. The car flipped over. It rolled like 3 times on the highway. And, I remember like the car being upside down. All of my CDs, because I had CDs, they were all spread out on the highway. The music's still pumping, like doom, doom, doom. The music's like still going. And all the windows broke. And all I remember was like smelling burning rubber. And I was like afraid that the car, like the airbags deployed, I was afraid that the car was going to like blow up. So I like crawled out of the driver's side window because I'm upside down. And the next thing I know, a guy happened to pull over. He was like behind me and he saw the whole thing. He ran over to me. He was like, "Oh my God, man, I can't believe you're alive." I was like, me neither. And luckily an ambulance happened to be driving by like at that moment. And they scooped me up and they got me in the ambulance. And it was like the minute they asked me if I felt any pain anywhere, it was like the subconscious, the adrenaline went down and
the switch went on.
Yeah. And so I basically completely dislocated my hip. I had to have 2 surgeries, one to set the hip back in place, and then the second one where they cut me open, about an 8-inch opening, and power washed all the shattered bone fragment out of my muscles, and then stapled me back up. And then I basically had to learn to walk on that right hip for about 3 months, which is how I got into the gym business. Because once I started getting better, I was like, I can't work right now. The only thing I could do, so I joined the gym and I became a gym rat. And then eventually I was like there so much, I was like, I should just work here.
I mean, so all things happen for a reason, right? I mean, that's crazy. But you've also had like some pretty serious incidents with your heart as well, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's strange, man, because, one thing I always say is that I believe that for me in my life has in no means been perfect by any means, but I feel like God has always put the right people in my life at the right time, right? Like I can think of a million different scenarios where I was in a jam and another human being was there to like save my life. So, so first was that ambulance that was driving by on the highway. The second time was, I had a heart issue this was a little over 4 years ago. So it was just less than 2 months after my 40th birthday, September 5th, 2019. I was training jiu-jitsu on a Thursday morning. It was first day of school for my kids, first day of high school for my son. And that in and of itself was a traumatic thing for me. I was so worried about my son, going to high school. So, I had a pretty crazy childhood. That's a whole nother story. I could tell you about some crazy stuff that I've been through as a kid. I wasn't ever like a really bad kid, but I got into trouble. And, I was just so worried about my son because he's such a good kid and he's not street smart. And I was just so worried about him, like going to school. Is he going to get picked on? Is he going to get into fights? Does he know how to handle himself? And so I dropped him off at school. And that's my routine in the morning. I wake up, I walk the dog, I have some coffee, I take the kids to school, I come home, I either bang out a workout and then start the day, or I go train jiu-jitsu. On the days that I don't train, I work out. On the days that I do train, that's what I go do. So I went to my jiu-jitsu class. And so the way that the class works is it's an hour and a half. You get an hour of instruction, and then the last 30 minutes is sparring. So we usually do about, 5 6-minute rounds, or 5 5-minute rounds with a minute rest in between. And so on my last round, I was training with this guy. And when I got done, I got up and like my heart was racing. And I felt like a throbbing pain in my back, almost like I thought I pulled like a neck muscle or something. And like, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, but I knew something was wrong. And I knew that like, I didn't know what to do with myself. You ever been like in a situation like that where you just like, you just don't know what to do with yourself? Like you're like pacing back and forth. You don't know if you should lay down. You don't know if you should take a shower. You don't know if you should go for a run. Like I just didn't know what to do with myself. And so, but what I did know was I needed to leave. Like something in me was saying, you need to leave this place. So I was like, you know what? I'm just kind of winded. I'll go out. I'll get some fresh air. This happens sometimes when you train too hard. I got to get my heart rate down. I'll feel better. So I got in my truck and I started driving, and I wasn't feeling better. And so I'm like, maybe I should roll down the windows. I rolled down the windows. I didn't feel better. Then I was like, maybe I should put the air conditioner on. And none of that was working. So finally I got home and I was like, you know what? I need to take a shower. If I take a shower, I'll feel better. So I took a shower. I came out of the shower. I still wasn't feeling better. So I'm like, okay, I need to take a nap. I take a nap. I wake up. I'll feel like a new man. So I literally put a t-shirt on, a pair of basketball shorts. And as I'm going to lay down to take a nap. Now, when I lay down to take a nap, I put my phone on do not disturb. So I was literally about to lay down to take the nap, and my wife started calling me. And I picked up the phone, and she was basically telling me, so my wife's a crossing guard, a school crossing guard. She was basically telling me that another woman, another crossing guard, her son was starting school in the same high school as my son that day. She was like, I was talking to this woman, her son's starting there too, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of like was rushing my wife off the phone. I was like, my wife's name's Angela. I was like, Ange, I really can't talk right now. I don't feel too good. And she was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know. I feel something in my chest. And she was like, now on any other day, my wife would have probably been like, all right, go ahead, go take a nap. I'll see you when I get home from work. But she sensed that something was wrong. She was like, you don't sound right. I'm going to call 911. And so she called 911. And so now the paramedics get there and they're asking me all these questions. What did you do today? I told them I trained. Do you think you overtrained? I said, look, I've been training a long time. I've never felt this way. And I mean, John, I had sweat. I'm sitting still and sweat is like dripping off my nose. That's how much I'm sweating. And so the guy's like, look, I'm going to give you an EKG. He's like, you got to come with us either way because your wife said you had chest pain. When you have chest pain, you have to go. So he's like, I'm going to take an EKG. We'll take you to the emergency room. We'll run some tests. You'll probably be fine. And the next thing I know, he's like waking me up. He's patting me in the face. He's like, Paul, can you hear me? And my wife is screaming. She's like, oh my God, oh my God. She's calling up my mother. She's screaming, crying. And so apparently what happened was, as he said that, my eyes rolled up into the back of my head and I went into like cardiac arrest. And so they had to get the defibrillator and shock me. And so that's what I was waking up to, was him shocking me and then waking me back up. And then he said to me, he was like, look, man, you're having a heart attack. He's like, I'm going to, just listen to everything we tell you to do. We're going to get you to the hospital as fast as we can. And he said to me, and this is God's honest truth. He said, look, before we leave, I need you to look at your wife tell her everything's going to be okay and tell her that you love her. And I'm like looking at him, and he's like, tell your wife before you leave that you love her. And I'm like, all right. And so I'm like, I tell my wife, and I'm like, why is this guy telling me to tell my wife? Like, why is he making sure that I tell my wife I love her? So we get into the ambulance, and they're dumping nitroglycerin in my mouth. So nitroglycerin helps to open up your arteries. It's a vasodilator. And I'm laying down in the ambulance, and like, I'll never forget, like, the ambulance ride there, it's like a bumpy ride, right? Like, I'm shaking the whole way there. And so I had two guys there with me. One was the main guy, and one was kind of like his assistant. The main guy, he saved my life, but his bedside manner was like a little questionable. He was like, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'll be honest, I'm scared. And he goes, yeah, you should be scared. He's like, this is very serious. And the other guy was like, nah, man, don't worry about it. You'll be okay. And so, like, the whole way there, man, I'm like, I have all these things running through my mind. I'm like thinking, like, what did I do? Was it because I drank too much? Was it because I was on a keto diet for 2 months? Was it this? Was it that? What did I do to cause this? Right? Like, how did I contribute to this? Then I thought about my daughter. I'm like, my daughter's in school right now. She's probably like in her class, like, writing in her book. She has no idea that this is going on. And like, there's a chance that she could come home, and like, I'm not going to be there when she comes home. Like, I mean, not here, like on the planet, Yeah. So that was like freaking me out. And then, so we got to the hospital, and, he told me everything that was going to happen. He's like, you're going to get in there. He's like, there's going to be 1 million people looking at you. He's like, just listen to what the doctor tells you to do. So we got in there, and, I got in there. I looked like a science experiment. So first of all, they rip all your clothes off, and you have all these things attached to you. And I have all these, Japanese tattoos that go onto my chest. So at the time I had a shaved head. So I have this like shaved head. I have no shirt on. I'm covered in tattoos. I got all these wires on me, and I'm basically having a heart attack. And there's like a whole bunch of medical students there with the doctor, and they're like, what is this? They're like,
who is this guy?
Yeah, who is this guy? And so he said to me, look, I need you to sign this waiver. We need to give you a stent. This is a life-saving procedure. And, those words, I never had anybody say that to me before. And I was like, okay. And then, I went up into the cath lab, and I literally, what they do is I didn't know what to expect. I thought like I was going to need like open heart surgery or something like that, which, thank God I didn't. But basically they inserted a little wire. It's like a piece of chicken wire in my wrist. It runs up through your right arm across into your chest. And using dye, they can see which of the arteries is blocked. And once they find it, they basically put a little balloon in there, and they start pumping it, and it opens up the artery. And it was literally like I was laying down, and it felt like there was a 500-pound person sitting on my chest. And with every little pump, it was like the person was getting lighter, like they were getting off of me. And so I got into the room after that. The nurse came in, and she said, you had a heart attack? And I said, I did, huh? And she goes, oh yeah, you had the big one. You had a widowmaker. So a widowmaker means that I had a 100% blockage in my LAD artery. The LAD artery carries the most oxygen. So once that artery becomes compromised, if you are not in an emergency room, you have a 6% chance of survival. So when I went into cardiac arrest at my house, the only way, so when that happened, my heart rhythm went into something called VTAC. VTAC is when your top chambers and your bottom chambers are beating out of rhythm. The only way to reset that is with a defibrillator. That's it. If you do not have a defibrillator, or you're not near a defibrillator, you're going to die. So if my wife did not call when she called, if those guys would have hit traffic, if I would have stayed at the academy 10 minutes longer and then drove home, it was literally a 10-minute window, because within 10 minutes of them being there, they had to do it. So, yeah, so she basically saved my life by calling by calling when she did.
It's madness. I mean, I don't know. It like talk about the when you recover from that. I mean, the perspective you get on life and like what you want to do moving forward and your family and your kids. Like when the guy is there talking to you and he's saying, "Tell your wife you love her." Like I kind of I've never gone through anything like that. I mean, my dad had many stents put into his own body before he passed away. Funnily enough, I worked in one of my first jobs ever before I ever started doing anything on my own. When I was like 17 or 18, was in a company called Boston Scientific in Galway, and they manufacture stents. And my job was I was in charge of quality control. I'd look at the stents that were being made through a microscope, and if they didn't pass quality, they wouldn't get sent to America to be used in hospitals. So who knows? Maybe I actually passed the stent that's inside you, and it passed passed through my quality control. Who knows? Maybe or at least one similar to it, because it's like. But going back to the like that experience, I'm sure afterwards you were doing a lot of like retrospective thinking on, well, okay, I've been given another chance here. Like, what, like did you find yourself doing that, or did you find yourself getting perspective on the next time you come up against these minor challenges that on a day-to-day basis we blow out of proportion, when the reality is you went through a major challenge. Like, you went through a life-changing, life-threatening, potentially life-ending challenge, and you come out the other side of it.
Yeah, so so there's definitely some soul searching that happens. There's definitely a shift in perspective, but it's not all great, actually. So what happened to me was, initially I started having anxiety attacks, which I had never had in my life. You know, with all the things I've been through in my life, I never had an anxiety attack. And one day, about 6 months after I had this heart attack, so I had the heart attack in September, in March of 2020, so right when COVID started, I was like on my couch. I went for a walk. I came back. I was on the couch watching TV, and I felt like a flutter in my chest. And I was like, whoa, what is that? And so I got up and I looked at my watch, and I saw that my heart rate was going up. It was like 90, 100, 110, 115, 120, 125, 130. And I'm like sitting on the couch.
You sure you weren't on the treadmill?
And so, you know, in my mind, I'm like, is this happening again? Am I just bugging out? Like, what's going on here? But all I remember was the girls in the emergency room in the cardiac unit, when they sent me home, they said, look, if you ever feel anything ever again, you gotta call 911. So I told my wife to call 911. Paramedics come. Same paramedic I had the first time. The cool one, the good one, right?
The guy with the good bedside manner, or the bad bedside manner?
Yeah, the guy with the good bedside manner. Same guy comes to my house. So he does my EKG, and he looks at the EKG and he goes, yeah, you're all right. This is better than last time. So the other guy goes, well, what was it like last time? He goes, the last time he had tombstones on his EKG. He goes, when we looked at his EKG, we saw tombstones. And he goes, he was gray. He was literally gray when we came in the house. So they took me, they took me to the emergency room, and they do this thing called a troponin test. Troponin is a hormone that gets released into your blood when you have a heart attack. So that's how they check to see if you had one. Because some people can have it and then it goes away. And like, not every heart attack is a deadly heart attack. So not the problem, but the thing with troponin tests is that they usually do 2 of them, and they're like 3 or 4 hours apart from each other. So if you go into the emergency room, at least in New York, for this, you're going to be in there for at least 8 hours. This happened to me twice, 2 times after. One time I called an ambulance. The second time I drove myself. But both times I think it was just indigestion that led into a full-blown panic attack, which, you know, cortisol starts getting released and your heart rate just, it just goes up. And so there was that. then there was like, sometimes I had feelings of like, like almost like you start telling, because you start telling yourself this story based on like what you see in movies, how in movies something crazy happens to a person and then they transform and become this other person. And I'm like, I don't think I've transformed. Like, I haven't become this superhero that I'm supposed to become, Like, there are goals in life that I still haven't achieved. And, in certain aspects of my life, things are not as good as they used to be. And, like, I was letting that, like, beat me up a little bit, like, this isn't how the story's supposed to go. I'm supposed to be like this 10 times better version of myself than
Yeah.
I was before this happened, And so there's that. And so it's just managing all that stuff, man. Like the mind can be, if you let it get the better of you, it can be a crazy thing, man. Your mind can propel you to greatness, or it could torment you if you
100%.
let it.
And like, what's it, if you don't mind sharing, like, what's it like these days in terms of the anxiety levels and things like that? Does that still happen, or are you managing that better now?
No, none of that. I don't have any anxiety when it comes to this. As we've talked about, I've had certain struggles and challenges that I've been navigating in business, and we can get into that if you want. And so that kind of stuff, it doesn't make me anxious like it used to make me anxious. But what it does is it will place a certain amount of stress on me. But the way that I overcome that, first and foremost, is exercise. Like, for me, that's the most important thing. I have to do something physical every single day. And my dad recently passed away as well, about a year and a half ago. And really,
Sorry to hear that.
it was for nothing else than he was weak. So my dad had no cardiovascular issues, no cancer, nothing, was in perfectly good health, but he never exercised. And so once he started getting to like 77, 78, 79, he died at 83. Those last few years, he was walking with a walker. And what would happen is, like, over the last 2 years of his life, he would fall, get hurt, have to go rehabilitate in a nursing home. And then when you're not physically fit and you're old, that's just a downward spiral. Like, one little thing that's it, change the trajectory of your life. And
Yeah.
so he wound up in the nursing home for like the fifth or sixth time, and he got COVID. And that's how he passed away. And so, like, the lesson that I take away from that is, like, I want my body. And I asked my dad when he was alive, I was like, Dad, did you ever work out? And he goes, yeah, I didn't like it. And I'm like, I don't necessarily like it. Yeah, I don't like it, but I know it needs to be done. But what I found is I found workouts that I enjoy now, because I'll be honest with you, I don't like lifting weights. This building that I'm in is a gym. My friend owns this building. He owns the gym. He owns a bunch of gyms out here and in New Jersey. Literally, I'm a member of the gym. It's literally a 10-foot walk. I walk outside, go out the door, and then the door right next door is a gigantic big box club. But I don't like lifting weights. So I found unconventional stuff, kettlebells, clubs, maces. I like that kind of stuff. That stuff is fun for me, and I enjoy it more than lifting weights. So that,
Plus, I mean, all of that stuff is functional as well. Because I mean, I'm pretty much the same as you. I mean, my dad passed away when he was 70, and like the last 15, 20 years of his life was like, it was all on decline. It was like he was in and out of hospital. He had multiple pacemakers fitted, multiple stents fitted, multiple heart attacks, like so many problems and operations the whole time. And like, that's like, seeing my dad's decline really affected me in a positive way, that I don't want to go down that path. And now it's like my mom, she's nearly a year in a nursing home, and we had to put her in because she's got early dementia, but she's thriving in there now, which is great. But she's also on a physical decline right now, and like a lot of the things that I'm focused on right now in terms of my health and like fitness and everything else, it's more about this concept that I've really started to pay a lot more attention to, is like not having a long lifespan, but having a long health span. Is where that you don't get that decline you can still be functional in your 80s and 90s, whether it's running, walking, exercising, and everything else. It's not about you get to a certain age and then you stop. It's like, no, there is no stopping. It's like to really have a long health span and live healthily and happily into your 70s, 80s, 90s, even to 100 if that's what you want to do. It's possible by doing the things you love in terms of exercises. If it's kettlebells for you, and if it's maces, and if it's, I don't know, beating tires outside, or whatever the case it is you're doing with big sledgehammers, or whatever the case it is, brilliant, because it's functional, it's keeping your body active, it's keeping you young, it's keeping you fresh. It does matter that when you, in later life, if you do fall off a step ladder, off a ladder, or fall off, whatever the case is, you're just going to get right back up. Whereas a lot of other people, if they fall, like elderly people that haven't exercised, maybe like your dad, if they fall, they could break their hip and that's it. They're done. Like they're in rehabilitation mode, and then it's like it's a long slog to get back to a base level that was already way below their base level when they were younger. Whereas you can keep a stronger base level when you focus on like things like health span. And it's something that I'm really curious about, and it's something I'm like I want to dive into a lot more, and for myself, but also for for Jess and for if and when we have kids as well, like for kids as well, as because like I think it's the most important thing in the world. I mean, you can make all the money you want in your business, and I hope people go out there and do that. But like, if at the end of the day your health is not where it's at, like, what's the point?
100%, man. Absolutely.
So one of the things you mentioned, and I think I've seen you mention it a lot in your YouTube channel as well, is the idea of street smarts. And I think I firmly believe in like street smarts as well. Like I grew up in a rough area, maybe not rough compared to some areas in New York or in the US or whatever the case is, but where we grew up, it was pretty rough. We had a lot of, nasty people in the area as well. And it wasn't exactly an easy upbringing in terms of, I went through a lot of bullying and stuff like that. And I went through a lot of, nasty stuff that I don't necessarily talk about right now, but it does give you a level of street smarts that does allow you to deal with everyday things in a way that people that don't have street smarts. You mentioned your son when he was starting high school didn't have those street smarts, and it does give you a level of I don't know, it gives you a base that to be able to deal with things in a different way than other people would deal with them. And I think it certainly helps in business and in marketing as well, and obviously in persuasion as well. It can help. But like, how do you see street smarts applying to what you've done in business, and and how's it things like that helped you? Because I know you've mentioned it a lot on your channel and stuff.
Yeah. So what I've realized, and again, this goes back to like filtering information and sequencing information, and like how sometimes there's just value in that, right? And so like I've created like lots of programs on influence, persuasion, all the different techniques and tricks that you could use to build rapport and all that jazz, right? But really, what I've come to observe, I would say, over the past 15 years of studying this stuff, is that I've identified like these 6 superpowers when it comes to not just influence and persuasion, but like communication. And for me, they're like 1, 2, maybe even 3 levels above kind of all the tactical stuff that most people teach, right? And like I feel like when you have these things or you have these traits, you instantly become a better communicator. You're more influential, you're more persuasive, you're able to navigate challenges in life when it comes to like other people. And when you don't have them, any one or more of these things, when they're missing, I find is it makes you like worse at communication. And so these 6 things for me are awareness, authenticity, authority, aptitude, articulative ability, and adaptability. And so like awareness is like probably the most important one. And that is like this idea of like, how aware are you of the context, environment, circumstance that is surrounding the interaction between you and the individual or you and the audience? How aware are you of their body language and what they're projecting? How aware are you of your body language and what you're projecting? How aware are you of your tonality, your vocal pace, your rhythm? How aware are you of their vocal pace, tonality, and rhythm? Because what I find is that when most people communicate, they're not really listening. They're just waiting for you to shut up so they can talk, right? And like I've always just been a very perceptive person. Like I can tell like when someone got a haircut. Like I know that sounds like, well, anybody could tell, like, but I can tell like even like a regular kind of haircut like this, I'll be like, you got that haircut yesterday, right? Or you got it like 2 days ago. Or like I could tell when I just pay very close attention to that kind of stuff.
When did I get my haircut?
Well, your hair always looks different. Sometimes it's real long, and so I don't know if you're in a phase now where you cut it short and now you're letting it grow back, or
I think it was about 2 weeks ago. I can't even remember myself. So
okay, all right.
I never get it cut short anyway. So this is about as short as it gets.
That's as short as it gets, yeah. And so, you know, you have awareness, right? Then you have like authenticity, which is like I find that authenticity. There's like a fine line between when you want to, if you want to be a great communicator and you want to be influential, you have to be authentic to who you are, but you have to be like the most influential version of yourself without becoming someone else. And what I found is that people that are poor communicators, they're either too authentic, if such a thing exists, meaning that because they're not aware of the context, environment, and circumstances, they're like, they keep it too real. Like, in other words, like, I'll give you an example. Years ago, I interviewed a guy to work for me in the gym as a housekeeper. And like, when he showed up for the interview, he had on like a t-shirt and jeans and like, you know, he was just like not dressed for a job interview. And he was a great guy. Like, he was very well spoken, very articulate, probably overqualified for the job. But I asked him, I was like, you know, why did you show up to a job interview wearing like a t-shirt? And he goes, because you know what? I know that like, I knew I would get along with you. And, you know, no matter what, my charm and my intellect would come through. And he wasn't wrong. Like, the guy was very charming and very articulate. But the fact that he wasn't aware enough to know that you don't show up to a job interview dressed like that is the reason I didn't hire him. Because I said to myself, if he lacks that much awareness, no matter how articulate and how intelligent he may be in other aspects, what else is this guy, where else is he going to be lacking awareness? Right? So he was almost being too authentic. Like, you know, like you have to talk a certain way at a funeral, and it's different than the way you communicate with people at a wedding. You communicate differently with your buddies when you're out having a beer than you do with your boss when you're talking about business stuff, right? It's the same thing like, you know, like you and I, you know, when you and I communicate, we might talk in a certain way, we might use certain words, but like we don't use them in front of Todd and Damien out of respect for them, just because that's not how they communicate, right? And we're working in a setting that is their business. And so I noticed that you and I are always like very mindful and respectful of that. And like some people just aren't. They're just like, well, that's who I am.
Sometimes some words accidentally get through if I get really excited. But for the most part, yeah.
A minor one though. A minor one. Right. None of the crazy ones.
Not
the
real stuff.
Yeah, not the real stuff. So like, you know, and I think there's something to be said about that. Like, I think that that's admirable, right? That we're both aware enough to know where somebody else's values are when it comes to communication, and we respect that, right? We're not like, well, this is who I am, take it or leave it, right? Now, to the flip side of that, you have people that almost try too hard. And that's where you get like that used car salesman type of vibe where they're almost like trying to be too persuasive. They're trying to be too slick. And so authenticity when it comes to communication is like a fine balance of you got to be yourself, but you also have to be like the most persuasive, influential version of yourself based on the context, environment, and, circumstance and all that kind of stuff. And then you have authority, which is, that's just a well-known, that is a well-known fact, an observation from the world of influence and persuasion, that people respect and listen to authority figures. So the more of it you have, or the more of it you position yourself to have, the more likely people are to listen to you. Your aptitude is like how good you are at the thing that you are trying to influence people that you are good at, right? Like, I believe you have to have aptitude, right?
100%.
I also believe that just because you have aptitude doesn't mean that you can be influential and persuasive. I know plenty of people that have a high aptitude, that are very skilled, very educated, very talented, but they don't know how to communicate it, right? So you have to have both. But you definitely, in my opinion, you have to have it, because ultimately somebody's going to test you. Somebody's going to put you in the hot seat, and you got to be able to back up, what you say you can do. Next is your articulative ability. It's just your ability to articulate your thoughts, your feelings, without using filler words like and ah and and right and things like that. And then lastly is like your adaptability, your ability to adapt the way that you communicate based on the environment, context, circumstance, from your awareness and the feedback that you get from your audience and the people that you're communicating with. Again, this is another thing that poor communicators, they don't know how to adapt. They got one way of talking, one way of communicating. It's their way or the highway, and they're not cognizant at all of anything that any kind of feedback that they're getting from the other person or from the other group of people. And so that's when barriers happen. So that's my answer to that question, is like, those are the 6 things that, like, I feel like if people just learn those, all the other stuff kind of falls into place.
I mean, I love that. I actually never heard you describe those 6 things in that way, and I haven't heard anybody else describe them in that way as well. And like, there's so many knock-on effects from those 6 things, and so many parallels to what we teach and what we coach, whether we're coaching clients on their ads or coaching the clients on their copy and everything else. And I'd love to spend more time talking about it, and maybe we'll dive into those 6 things again. I know I'm conscious of your time. I know you have to jump in the next few minutes, but is there anywhere that people can go to learn more about those 6 things from you, or where can people go to find out more about Paul, dive into some of your stuff, or get your help? Because I know, like, we haven't had a chance to dive into it, but you're a big, like, one of the things that you absolutely love doing is coaching people through not just this thing, but also coaching people through creating their offers, creating their marketing campaigns, so they can be ready for someone like me who can drive their media and get them traffic and eyeballs and everything else. But how can people find out more about you, your coaching, and everything else that you're doing?
Yeah, so let me just pull up a link, because I wasn't really expecting to drop one, but I'll pull it up 1 second. Because it's funny, I actually literally, like, 2 weeks ago, put the finishing touches on putting those 6 things in like a little cheat sheet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. So
Good timing.
Great timing. So do you want me to just pop it in the chat?
You can stick it. You can call it out as well for people that are going to be listening or watching this. So
yeah, so it's go.influenceacademy.net/A6-cheat-sheet. And I'll
couldn't
pop
have
it in
it
the
any
chat
more complicated,
there.
no?
Yeah.
/52x gobbledygook.com.
But yeah, that's where they can pick up that cheat sheet. And
well, we'll make sure to get that link into the show notes that's going to be getting done for this and everything else, and we'll get that put across, and you can send it to me afterwards. Dude, this has been absolutely incredible. Talk about like, to be honest, I was really nervous about doing this first ever episode of Curiosity FM. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, maybe nervous is good, but like, I think this was incredible. I mean, you shared so much from your story, the lessons that you've learned. You've shared like those 6 things. I mean, like, there's so much to unpack from that, and like, I'm going to get the cheat sheet myself. So, Paul, thanks so much for coming on, and maybe we'll have you on again where we can dive deeper into some more interesting things. I know you're doing some stuff with AI as well, as am I. and maybe we'll talk about some of that stuff again at a later stage. But dude, thank you so much. I know you've got another meeting coming up where you got to get ready for another meeting, so we'll call it there. But again, thank you so much. This has been really, 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 really valuable.
Thank you for having me, bro. I enjoyed it. The time went by like that, as it always does when we chat, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, and if I'm not talking to you before Christmas, have a great Christmas, and we'll be seeing you in Puerto Rico in January.
Yes, sir.
Looking forward to it.
Same here, brother. Merry Christmas to you too.